Coming up next, we have Loren Kelley, Enterprise Strategy at Bolt. Loren comes with over a decade of experience in payment processing. He has spent over 2 years leading the effort in training, building, and expanding a sales team throughout the U.S. From a low brick-and-mortar shops to the largest enterprise companies in the world, Loren has worked with on nearly every use case in payments. Ladies and gentlemen, Loren Kelley.
Thanks, man. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I really like these mics. This is pretty nifty. I feel like you put one of these things on and you instantly gain 10 IQ points. So hopefully I'm going closer to Tom Hanks, further away from Forrest Gump. So I've been with Bolt for about 2 years. I've been in payments for about 13 years. I look after enterprise strategy for Bolt. Bolt is a checkout platform, so our focus is purely on the checkout experience. And so what I'm going to talk about today is perfecting checkout. So exceptional metrics, exceptional end of funnel metrics. So everything from the point of clicking a checkout button all the way through the fraud metrics. So first thing we'll talk about are the problems at checkout. So just a few things that really hang people up when they're in checkout, and hopefully this is really useful for anyone who's working on checkouts in the audience. So we'll talk about all the little things that bug us at checkout. Hopefully I can get some audience feedback as well. We'll talk about the metrics that matter. So if you're going to start improving your checkout funnel, what are the metrics that you should be thinking about? What are the things that really matter there? And then I'll talk a little bit about how Bolt is perfecting checkout. And then if we have time, we'll do some questions and answers. So first, the problem. 75% of customers abandon their cart at checkout. This number obviously varies by retailer, but this is a tremendous problem. There's obviously a huge room for improvement. Checkout really hasn't changed much at all since the beginning of the internet. If you were paying with a credit card, you still had to enter all of this information in a form. It might get a little bit faster from load times, but essentially the forms are still exactly the same. And so there's a big opportunity here to improve this. The second problem is that there's $100 billion in falsely identified transactions or falsely identified as fraudulent transactions. So these are known as false positives. You may not think that checkout and fraud are intrinsically linked, but that's really the way we see it at Bolt. We're concerned with everything that happens from the moment that user clicks on checkout. So we're going to talk a little bit about fraud as well. So what are the bad experiences in checkout? For those of you that are working on Magento or that have a Magento website, any Magento users here? Yeah? Cool, just a few. So you know when you click that checkout button, you get that little spinning wheel conversion killer. They say every second of page load time kills about 7% in conversion. And the average Magento checkout load time is about 6 seconds. So you're really starting to eat into that there. Login walls. Mandatory logins. These are both really concerning. I think even if you have a guest checkout, if you're asking people to log in right when they get to your website, you're going to start losing people. We see about 40% drop off when asked for a login wall before entering the checkout. You know, as a consumer, I'm not really ready to commit to your brand. You may want my information so that you can retarget me and market to me and do loyalty and all those good things, but right now I'm just trying to buy the product and these really hang me up. Redundant inputs. So the other day I was trying to check out and somebody asked me for my email address twice, right? If you have really great error handling in your checkout, there's no reason to ask for that twice. Billing address requirement. So this is something that we've thought about a lot and how fraud and checkout are very linked. A lot of the information that you gather in checkout is purely there to prevent fraud. So you're asking for a billing address so that you can send that back down to your payment gateway or to your processor or to your fraud tools. And if your fraud tools are built in mind with checkout, they're going to complement that checkout rather than complicate it. And so there's really not a good reason to be asking for this with a product that actually can complement the checkout. This adds 10 lines of information to a checkout experience, right? So it's a little arduous. It also leads to false positives. So again, linking fraud to checkout, if I misenter my billing address, I might get rejected, right, as a fraudulent transaction. Some people will just click that my billing and my shipping are the same, and then their order might get rejected if that's not actually true. Scrolling on a mobile device. I think I do this every time I'm on a mobile device. Anytime I have a product in my cart and I go to a checkout, I start scrolling and looking to see how long is this going to take. A lot of people have migrated to one-page checkouts, which really this does this a lot, right? You have to scroll through that and look at how much do these people want from me. Entering numbers without a numeric keypad on a mobile device. So I get the QWERTY keypad when I'm in the card field, or I get the QWERTY keypad when I'm entering my telephone number. We should really have that numeric keypad. These are simple things, but they really help. Redirects, again, the Magento experience, you get redirected every time you click to next. Poor error handling, confusing shipping options, too many payment options. I see this a lot on websites where the payment options are, you have everything there, right? Because you want to help with conversion, but you end up offering too much choice and people get analysis paralysis here. One other thing while I talk about payment options, if you offer PayPal or Apple Pay or anything like that, really have that on the cart page. If I'm on a mobile device and I'm going through checkout, I want those options first and foremost. If I click checkout and I get loaded into a screen that's asking me for my shipping information, my billing information, and all of that, I could have easily skipped all of that by just clicking PayPal from the cart page. So really simple step to just add those buttons to the cart page, and it's going to help out a lot. Are there any other examples? Does anybody have anything that's like a pet peeve at checkout? Anything you hate seeing at checkout? No? All right. So checking out today should be as easy as ordering an Uber. Right? It should be really, really seamless. But checkout hasn't changed in 20 years. It's been exactly the same as it was in the 90s, and it continues to be so. I'm going to show you how we're addressing this to make every single checkout online a single-click checkout. But first, I want to talk about why it isn't. So if you're looking for excuses as to why your checkout still isn't quite great, I'll give you a few here. There are platform limitations. Most retailers will just take whatever they get out of the box from their platform, right? You'll just take the Magento checkout template and run with that. And you'll optimize everything else in the funnel before getting to checkout and just leave that with what it is with Magento. And the reason for that is that it's very risky and resource intensive to customize a checkout experience. There are lots of API endpoints that connect to checkout. If you really want to hone in your checkout, you're going to be A/B testing for a really long time. You're going to be making little tiny tweaks so you can measure, what that did for your checkout experience. And you're gonna be doing this for months, and it's gonna take your eye off of a lot of other projects while you do this. And then finally, fragmentation. And this is where Bolt is really focused, is on the fragmentation in the space. Checkout talks to a lot of different pieces within your tech stack. So you have your Magento or WooCommerce, BigCommerce, whoever your platform is, and the information that's being inputted in checkout is being communicated downstream to all of these different providers, right? So you want your payments information to get to your payments provider, the fraud information to get to the fraud provider, fulfillment, logistics, and there are others, tax calculation, gift cards, discount codes, quite a few different pieces that talk to checkout. So it's a really difficult thing to customize, and it becomes very, very risky if something breaks along the way. It also puts a lot of onus on the customer to enter the data that you need to get back downstream to all of these other tools, right? So that's why there's so much that's asked of a consumer when they start entering their information. So before I talk about how Bolt is sort of solving some of these things, I want to talk about, and hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration to go look at some of these metrics and see how you're doing, right? And do a little gut check on how your checkout is working. So the first thing is conversion rate, checkout rate, order approval rate, and chargeback rate. These are the 4 metrics that we're really focused on and that we talk a lot about with our retailers. One of the things we talk a lot about in e-commerce is conversion rate, and it can mean almost anything, and it gets really confusing when you're talking to a vendor or a retailer and they're talking about increasing your conversion rate. What does that actually mean? I mean, you're going to increase my site conversion, cart abandonment, checkout conversion, auth rate. All of these things are important, but what I want to focus on is the checkout rate. So the checkout rate is when someone clicks on that checkout button, how many of those users actually make it through the process? And so you can build a funnel there and see where they're dropping off in that process. Maybe it's the shipping step, likely that's the case. But there's lots of different points there and interaction points where they might drop off through this. So you want to measure this from the point someone clicks on that checkout button. And it might be 3 or 4 different rates because you might have 3 or 4 different experiences depending on the products that you're selling or the interaction that user is having. So if you have a subscription product, that's going to be a totally different checkout flow. If you have a one-off purchase, that'll be a totally different checkout flow. Or maybe you have a logged in user, and that'll be a totally different checkout flow, right? And they're all going to have different checkout rates associated with these. I made a little note down here that checkout rate also includes the auth rate. So if you're working with a credit card processor, that credit card processor will reject some of your orders. So they'll reject some of those payments. This is before you even talk about fraud tools or gateway logic or anything like that. Your payment processor is going to reject some of those payments. And if it's a good US payment processor and you're only selling domestically, you're probably doing just fine there. Still worth doing a quick check. But if you sell internationally, this is actually a huge component. So for instance, if you're selling into Brazil cross-border, 50% of your transactions are likely going to be declined if you're using a US entity, right? And so there's lots of vendors out there that can help with that, but it does factor into that checkout rate because some of those transactions are going to get declined. Order approval rates. So these are orders that are approved after a fraud check, right? And you want to balance this with your chargeback rate. There are lots of different types of chargebacks. People say, well, I have a chargeback problem. And so they're not really focused on that order approval rate problem. They just want to bring the chargebacks down. We talk to a lot of retailers that are like, my chargebacks are high. I've implemented a fraud tool. It took it down, but I don't know what it did to my order approval rate, right? The way to fight fraud is to decline transactions that you think are fraudulent. But a lot of retailers end up declining a lot of good orders. If you have a chargeback problem, it's really important to know where it's coming from, right? So it might be fraud, but it might also be that you have maybe a vendor or someone or a supplier that is sending products that are not quite great, or maybe you don't have great address validation and you're sending products to a wrong address and people aren't getting their service. So you can ask your payment processor for the reason codes behind your chargebacks and find out if you really have a fraud problem or if it's something else that you can do internally to fix that chargeback problem. So this is Bolt. What we're really doing in the space is to try to bring all these things together, all of these fragmented pieces of technology that talk to checkout. We want to bring them all into a single platform and make them complementary of one another so we're not complicating the checkout with unnecessary fields. And thanks, Mark, for giving us a shout out earlier. One of the things that we do is to remove the billing address because we actually control the fraud detection. So if we're controlling fraud, we don't have to ask as much data from the customer as they're going through checkout, right? We can make that fraud tool complement the checkout experience. We also work with a host of different payment processors, digital wallets, recurring payments, fraud detection, and full fraud indemnification. So we take the fraud piece away from the retailer. They really don't have to worry about that piece. And as long as the order approval rates stay high, they're gonna be very, very happy. So what we're doing is we're learning from millions of different checkouts. I mentioned earlier that it is risky and resource intensive to customize a checkout experience. It really is, and it's difficult to garner a lot of knowledge when you have a limited data set. We have millions of different checkouts that we can look at, checkout instances where we can see where people are getting hung up. We can see the behavioral data of where people are getting stuck in a checkout process, release an A/B test, and then if that's actually proves statistically significant, we'll push out real-time upgrades and enhancements to our retailers. So a retailer joins up with Bolt, they get an immediate bump because their checkout experience has improved, but we're constantly iterating on that and improving it and making sure that it gets better over time. So it is the fastest checkout ever. I won't go through a full demo of this, but we have a few Boltistas here, Noah Small and Kira here, and they can actually run through a demo of this. But essentially, this is what the checkout process looks like. It takes about 34 seconds to get through it. Starting off with email address, it's a 3-step process, and if you'll notice, it looks really easy. That first step is really, really simple, right? It gets people in the frame of mind that, oh, this is not going to be that bad. I can commit to this. I can get through this really easily. And we're following all the best practices that I talked about above, right? So making sure that the information on the first page is very non-committal. We're getting really easy to input information here, things like Google Address API, looking at their IP address and making suggestions, in inline error handling, so you're not saving any .cons or Gmails into your marketing tools. And then we go to shipping, and then we move on to the card input information. You'll notice there's no billing address here, no billing zip code at all. So we remove that completely. And then at the very bottom, you'll see a save my information for faster checkout. So I'll talk about that in just a second, but to kind of sum up what we're doing here is we're just making it easier to get through this by removing about 4 clicks, 8 fewer fields, and we're about 35 to 90 seconds faster than the typical checkout process. I really love this slide. This shows exactly how Bolt compares to some popular platforms out here with Commerce Cloud and Magento, NetSuite. You can see kind of linearly here exactly how long it takes to get through these checkout experiences. It's about 1.5 minutes compared to 34 seconds with Bolt. Finally, this is one of the most exciting things that we're doing at Bolt. So when I was at Braintree, we talked a lot about how we could essentially create a new age wallet that, you know, if we're working with Uber and Airbnb and all these large retailers that are taking tons and tons of payments, can we take that information and make it portable across the web? So if I've checked out on Uber, but I've never checked out on Airbnb, I can then use that same payment instrument to check out there with a single click. And we've started out with this from the very onset. So when someone checks out on Bolt, we store their information, and then we make that information portable across the network. So we're creating a flywheel effect here. The more merchants and retailers that we work with, the more Bolt accounts are created, the more opportunity there is for a single-click transaction. And so a retailer's conversion is always incrementally improving using something like Bolt as long as we do our jobs and continue to grow that network. So check out on merchant A, go to merchant B, having never been there before, and check out with a single click, without a username, without a password. It's a really cool demo. Definitely come check it out after the talk here. So I'd be remiss if I didn't show you guys some proof points here. The purple is from the Baymart Institute and Furismo. This is just how websites are converting on the whole across e-commerce. Again, about 25% of people will click a checkout button and convert. On mobile, it's about 19% of people. Bolt, on the whole, is 37% conversion when somebody clicks that Bolt checkout button. When somebody clicks a Bolt checkout button on a mobile device, 33%. And then if they're offered a single click opportunity, meaning they've checked out on Bolt before, the conversion is 61.5%. So massive, massive improvements here. These are a few of the retailers that we're working with. If you don't get a chance to come see a demo, definitely take a look at some of these guys. Just go through the checkout experience on your own, do it on a mobile device, and see what that checkout experience is like. We'd love to hear your feedback as well. We're very driven by that sort of dialogue as well. We're going to be at the game tonight, so if anybody's going to the game, we'll be around. Come talk to us. We also do a 100-point checklist, so we'll go through your checkout and give you some tips and tricks on like what you might be able to do, even if you don't use Bolt, to see how you're actually doing. So thanks. If anybody has any questions, I have about 4 minutes left, so happy to take some questions. Yes. It's a good question. So what we're focused on right now is card payments. Card payments are great in most English-speaking countries, but once you get outside of that, it really varies. And those experiences vary a lot too, right? So if you're using something like Ideal in the Netherlands, that's really going to be controlled by Ideal. It's like hosted by Ideal. If you're using China Union Pay, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's hosted by China Union Pay. They control the experience. Alipay, same thing. So we're going to be focused on the card payments, mostly English-speaking markets, and then we'll partner up with some of those wallets and alternative payment methods to add those into our checkout as we expand internationally. Today, it's just card payments, though. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So our fraud tool is a machine learning fraud tool. Basically what it does is we have an algorithm that automatically approves the vast majority of orders that come through the system in the high 90% range. And then we have a manual review team that anything that looks risky, they're going to put human eyes on that. They're a 24/7 team. They have a 1-hour SLA, so it doesn't impact the customer experience at all. And we're really, really focused on increasing that order approval rate. So for anybody that's wondering, like, what's my order approval rate? It's a good order approval rate. Most fraud tools are going to get you 98% or better in terms of order approval rates. So if you're below that, talk to a fraud provider and see if they can help you. Cool. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I just wanted to check, will it support, as soon as I implement Bolt, will it support Apple Pay, Amazon Pay, Google Pay, as long as obviously we register as a merchant for those?
Yes, so Apple Pay is fully supported, PayPal is supported, Afterpay is supported. So those are the three that we have today. Really, if you have those three, you're kind of covering the market, right? Amazon Pay can be important, obviously, and that's on our roadmap to deliver.
Okay, so you said Apple Pay,
PayPal and Afterpay.
PayPal and Afterpay. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Back to the international question, you don't support some of the different payment processes internationally, but what do you like? Do you support duties and taxes? What does shipping look like? Do you have those import fees accounted for?
Yeah.
And then also, what does translation look like? Do you partner with different translation services like translations.com?
Yep. So we'll be doing all the translation on our side, just translating the pages for checkout. Sorry, remind me of the other pieces of that question.
Yeah, sorry, there was many questions, but the duties, taxes, import fees.
Yeah, so for shipping, we just tie into whatever you're using. So whatever that shipping logic is, we have webhooks to connect to whatever that provider is, and the same thing for tax calculation. We are partnered with Avalara as well, so we can do a lot of that on our side too. But if you have a tax provider, then we just partner into it and get that information into checkout. Did that answer it?
Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.